ZenFam, as you know, I love gaming. You love gaming. That's why you are here. That's why I am here in front of you. Because we love gaming. However, some truths need to be spoken. And in this video I am going to speak said truths. Back when I was a barista, we had a song we used in my store. Actually, across both the stores I worked in for the same company. It was an offshoot of the song from the Lego movie, and we only really used the one word, well, a set of words, the chorus basically, and it was basically went something like this: "Everything is broken!" Yeah, because in gaming, the industry, ouch, it's very broken. Let me begin to detail it for you. Let's take in, for instance, graphics. We've all been mad for graphics at one point or another in our individual gaming journeys. Companies are mad for graphics. The love of graphics has even seeped its way into other forms of media. One of the earliest examples I can think of this is in one of the Freddy movies, one of the Nightmare on Elm Streets, when Freddy Krueger is basically inhabited the dreams of a gamer and has heard to other ways, great graphics, you know? And it's been one of the cornerstones of gaming advertising since gaming had advertising. The graphical power, the grunt, the aesthetic look of the games. How fast they move, how well they move, the colours, the fidelity. However, this struggle for greater, prettier, more lifelike world simulation, uncanny valley beating, near life perfection has its costs. Its costs are numerous. For one, the time it takes to make these games. And time is a big factor going through all the points I'm going to discuss in this video. It takes so much longer to render a game in a realistic, lifelike manner. Okay? Because not only does the character have to be lifelike, so does their clothing. So does the world they inhabit, the trees, the mountains, the water, the buildings, the other players, the NPC characters, the the villagers walking through places. Depending on the time point of the video or in the world in which they inhabit, everything has to look right. It has to look believable. But what the problem with that is once a game is believable, then is it still looking believable then? Remember all the stuff we used to talk about? How good Skyrim looked, or how good Elder Scrolls looked, or any number of games that you could talk about, and how good they looked, and how amazingly lifelike they were. And, how many times have you heard the phrase, "Oh man, this game's like a Pixar movie"? Well, now games actually look better than early Pixar movies. In fact, games look often better than mid-time Pixar movies. But that takes time. It takes developers being there, putting in the work, slaving for hours and hours, days and days, weeks, months, years. Endless hours of work and grind, of not seeing their families. And then at the end of it, their team is disbanded. They probably get dropped by their studio, and then they have to go on the labour market and find themselves another job at another dev studio if they can't get back into the same dev studio on a different project, and then have to up sticks and move to another town, and heaven forbid they go somewhere like, San Francisco with crazy rents, So the monetary aspect of making games shiny and awesome and lifelike is one thing, but there's also the human cost on the people that make these things. And then because it takes so long to make these games look the way that we want them to look, you know, with these ultra realistic graphics, this lifelike perspective, then of course what happens is the game gets delayed. And the more it gets delayed, the more the average gamer will complain, because games are showing off often, nearly always, far too soon. May I draw your attention to Cyberpunk? May I draw your attention to actually quite a lot of games? I could stand here and I could spin off a list of games that have all been spoken of 3, 4, sometimes even 8 years, nearly a decade, where a game has been spoken about at the stage of E3 or Gamescom, or some sort of event online, or or footage is leaked out from an investor call, and a game gets spoken about. And because these games are so large and so complex, it takes a long time to build them, and then the public gets the idea that this game is coming out in year X. Year X comes, year X goes. And then the public, they get on their keyboards, and they go, where's the game? And the developers go, we're not done making the game. Then the developer is stuck in this situation. Do they finish the game to its full potential and make sure that everything works, every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and make sure that when the game comes out it runs lovely, it looks wonderful, there's a minimal amount of bugs, because there's always bugs in games, that's just what it is, because they're so complicated, so many moving parts, so much code colliding with other parts of code, you're gonna get things going wrong. Okay, nothing perfect. The first law of Starfleet engineering: the more complicated the device is, the more likely it is to break down. So you have these extraordinary complicated bits of software, okay, that take these long periods of time to make and perfect. And then because it might take a bit longer to make it than what was originally, projected, because things can happen, a company can go into, could have strikes with its staff, it could have layoffs, it could lose money, it could have a global illness, anything can happen, and does happen, and will happen, because life is unpredictable. So these games can often come out, 2 years maybe late. Let's just say for argument's sake, 2 years late to get your game. And all that time, the public is out there going, where's that game? Where's that game? And sometimes, developers, they will buckle under that pressure. They'll go, right, here's your game. And then the game will come out. And what's the first thing we hear about? The day one patch. And then the game will come out and reviewers will get their hands on it. And even some of us YouTubers will get our hands on early copies if we're so lucky to be on nice terms, partnered with developers and all the rest of it, all that lovely stuff that your boy hopes to do one day. Okay? The game comes out, we play, YouTubers play it, and reviewers from websites like Kotaku and Kinda Funny and, all the rest of it, all the big sites, your IGNs and all that, your GameSpots and blah 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 blah. And they all play the game, and there's always variations of what each one has, but if the game is broken, then they'll say the game is broken. And then the public will get their hands on it and go, this game is broken. Why did you ship a broken game? And the developer's like, well, if we didn't ship the broken game, you would hound us till the game was actually out and tell us that we didn't get the game out fast enough. It's like the devs cannot win. They can't win in this situation. Either the game has taken too long or it's come out too soon. It's the ultimate example of the Goldilocks effect. If you don't know what the Goldilocks effect is, then you need to look at your science, guys. Alright? The Goldilocks effect is basically what Earth is. Right? We are just close enough to the sun to provide us with heat and light and energy, and to make sure our weather works, but we're not so far away from the sun that we're too cold and that we don't have enough light You know, we're exactly where we need to be for life to flourish on this planet, although admittedly we're killing ourselves with fossil fuels. But that's a story for another time, children. Okay, then another way that the industry is broken, oh god, aside from the fact that we expect too much from our graphics, you know, is also that, like, we have all this power, all this storage, but yet, what do we actually do? What do games development houses do with a lot of this storage? You know, they go, right, we got these massive games, these massive worlds, you know, we got these massive discs or massive downloads. Yet a lot of it is fetch questiness, you know, it's like, go here, pick up this, go here, pick up that. You know, have this armor, have that armor, have this weapon, which is all lovely, but it's the same thing over and over and over and over, you know. I mean, behind me, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I love this game. As you guys know, I've spoken a few times now. Poured over 240 hours into this puppy. But the game in some ways, you know, does get very close to wearing out its welcome. Because you're doing a lot of the same thing a lot of the time. As you have done with pretty much every Assassin's Creed. And we have all this space, and we have all this creativity, we have all this we have all these teams that have incredible knowledge, and we've got all these people who have worked on smaller games who have done really cool and interesting tiddly things in games, and then do these tiddly things make their way to the bigger games and get expanded upon and turned into new experiences for us to experience in AAA titles, so then these tiddly experiences can become, you know, more lifelike experiences and make the immersion of a game deeper. So more often than not, no. What we get is like the same experience we had in hour 1 replicated into hour 2, 3, 4, 5, blah 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 blah. And this is nothing on devs, this is everything to do with the corporate structure. The big guys at the top go, see that thing you did there? Do that a bazillion more times because that thing makes us money. But then if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, then the audience, the ones who buy the games, gets tired, gets bored. You know, video games are about fun, they're about adventure, they're about excitement, you know. A Jedi may not seek adventure and excitement, but by jingo a gamer does. Okay? And if we don't have that in our games, what do we have? Loading screens. Loot grinds. Loot boxes. NFTs? Oh hell no. I mean, like recently, Ubisoft in their infinite wisdom have decided that what they want to do is bring out little statues that you have to buy with cryptocurrency, you know. You can't just buy them with money, you have to spend money to buy cryptocurrencies so you can buy little figures, okay? And then these little figures, you know, can do other things that are like for the game but aren't actually for the game. So they don't even do you a pay to win in the game or a pay to look more awesome in the game. They're just like little things you can have. And so they're an even more pointless version of something that's already pointless and harmful to the environment. And also, you know, because it's a cryptocurrency and it's basically a currency market, it's gambling! Woohoo! All the nasty in one little container. Well done, Mike. Well done, Ubisoft. Oh, very well done. Good God. At least other companies have learned NFTs are trash. We do not want them, we do not need them, and they are no good for nobody, no time, nowhere, in no situation. Then of course, you know, we got the whole thing that like games are getting more and more rare to actually physically own. Have you walked into a game recently? This is obviously a UK issue, but I'm pretty sure it's the same thing happening in other game chain stores all over our miserable little mall of ball of mud that orbits the sun. Now basically, you walk into a gaming shop and you've got a selection of games up one wall, and the rest of the store is filled with t-shirts, mugs, board games, Funko Pops, plushies, you name it. Few PC accessories, some keyboards, maybe a second-hand case for some bits and pieces, couple of phones, couple of tablets, couple of systems. But largely speaking, you go into a modern chain gaming emporium, and what do you see? I'll tell you what you see, because you know what you see. You see basically a glorified toy store. That is what you're walking into. You know? You're walking into a glorified toy store. And what we really need games to do is to use their magnificent power. I mean, we've got these incredibly powerful systems. We've got the Xbox Series X. We've got the PlayStation 5. Two of the most powerful bits of gaming tech to have existed thus far. You know? And we don't really have water that acts like water. It looks pretty. Don't get me wrong. I mean, some of the water physics, oh my god. But it's just the look of the water. You know, you might get pushed by a current when you're swimming underwater, but it's an illusion, you know? And like the way animals react, the way trees blow in the wind, the way you walk through long grass. Some games do it really, really well. I mean, like the Horizon games are just excellent at the way their vegetation moves as you move through it, you know? The way that light bounces about. We've got ray tracing, or at least near like ray tracing things within games now. And we're starting to see some kind of movement in the way that, like, you know, faces and animations and the way that the human body hangs, you know, or the way the human body stands and positions itself. You know, when people aren't thinking about how they're standing, they're just there. They're not like T-poses. You know, they're not like, this is the position that the developer put me in. They react more naturally. They sway a bit. You can see intercostal movement. There's blinking. There's sweat pores. There's, you know, things that can, minutiae of detail that can be applied now because we have this. We don't have to have these multi-hour, 100 billion acre expanses of nothing. I mean, look at Grand Theft Auto 5. We've all had our time at Grand Theft Auto 5 and that huge, expansive, incredible map, but it's filled with a lot of nothing. I mean, seriously, you make your way from Los Santos to Sandy Shores. What do you really see while you're there? Not a lot. You see a variation in trees and shrubs. You move from grassland to desert. You see a lake, couple of dotted airports, some small amounts of buildings here and there, a bit of farmland, but largely speaking, you know, you see edited nothing. It's like, and if you're going to have a game, the map needs to sing, it needs to speak, it needs to invite the player in. It's like, if I'm going to go this direction, then there's got to be something to bring me that direction, you know? And while I'm headed that direction, it's sort of like, there should be things for me to see and interact with and maybe even do on the way. So like, while I'm on my way to, you know, that place up north, going, ooh, what's this? Ooh, what's that? Wow, that's nice. Screenshot, you know? It's like, that's nice. Oh, avoid that, you know? It's sort of like, the journey has to be exciting because it's not real life. Yeah, when you take a drive from, you know, like say, many times I've driven, been in a car and gone a long distance, like say from Kettering when we visited my wife's grandmother and we've come back to Edinburgh. It's like a lot of that journey is basically just spent on motorways, you know? Motorway, service station. Oh, truck with an interesting art on the side of it. Motorway. Ah, the sign for Scotland. Yay! A road. It's monotonous, it's boring. And if we're buying a game for 60, 70 quid, and you're wanting to go from A to B, then there has to be stuff in that journey. There has to be things to keep you there, because the whole point of a game is not about crushing realism, although that is good. But the crushing realism needs to be interspersed with experience. You know? If there's no experience, there's not really a game. It's just a life simulator with some crazy events. You know? And if I want that, then there's other things to do. That's not where we lie in gaming. And not everything has to be super high level life experience, like I've already stated. You know? I mean, some of the most fun things I've ever played have been done in cel-shaded graphics. You know? I mean, can I draw your attention to, Borderlands? I mean, Borderlands is hardly realistic, but my god, it's fun. In fact, you don't even need to have games that are super realistic. You can have games that have a more cartoony aesthetic, but you could load an area of, with far more things to do and people to interact with and enemies. Imagine being given a gigantic crazy weapon, like in Doom you've got your BFG, and you could have an entire valley of low level enemies just to go in and just destroy, or you could have games where you're doing a small task but a really intricate level, and you're having to use the tilt of your controller and having to work with the vibration of it, and maybe doing intricate motions on the touchpad and stuff. I mean, obviously that's PlayStation, you have to do different things for Xbox, but there's so many possibilities that get left on the side because our games, all they really do is they just get a bit prettier. We never really work on map navigation, I mean, we could have games with much more expansive radio stations, or, you could even do things like have a game that has an internal podcast, you could have actors playing fictional podcasters, and whenever you're driving around, or you could be on a space station and you could have this podcast playing in the background, that you turn on and turn off. You even have you find audio files. We're used to finding audio files, but audio files that could be fun. And you could be doing this thing where you're working on a space station and you're trying to fix the space station, and in between the fixing of the space station bits, maybe you're fending off aliens or whatever, and you're it's like a base builder, and you could have a podcast, and you find the podcast recordings, as you fix different bits of the station, you find more recordings, and it could be these 2-3 hour long files while you're doing all the busy work to keep the station going and make sure it doesn't fall apart for the next encounter, and it could be tied into the story, maybe there could be a situation where you have maybe the fall of mankind, and your space station is one of the last vestiges of the species, and because you're up on the space station you don't know how it went down, but the podcast tells you how it went down, so you could chill, and you could be fixing a bulkhead with a a welding gun or something, and you could be listening to the podcast, and the podcast could come through the microphone on your controller, so that it has that different audio quality to the audio quality of what's come through your TV speakers. And you could be listening to the podcast, chilling out, fixing bits of space station, and getting actual real insight into the actual world of the game. And it didn't have to be, super realistic, but you could do things like that. Things that contextualize the world and actually bring about what we've always talked about as gamers, immersion. I mean, back in the day, our games didn't look that good, We look back with rose-tinted spectacles and we go, yeah man, remember when games looked like, were so cool back in the day. And then you go back and you play that game, and it doesn't, because they say you should never meet your idols. I mean, I remember, must be about 2001, 2002, as a quote-unquote adult, I watched Battle of the Planets, having not watched it since I was about 8 or 9, and I was horrified to see that my beloved Battle of the Planets that I enjoyed in summer holidays, but I could never watch all of, because English summer holidays and Scottish summer holidays are off by a fortnight. It's like when Scottish summer holidays start, for the first 2 weeks, English schools are still in, and then for the last 2 weeks of the English school holidays, the Scottish kids are back in school. So we'd only get the middle part of the, we'd get the beginning, but we'd miss the end, because TV comes from London, or at least it did then. It's a bit more separated out now, but it's still English based. So I watched this Battle of the Planets, and I was going, this is rubbish. And that's how it is when you go back and you play retro games. You have to set yourself in the mindset that goes, okay, this is how the game looked, but it's the story, it's the gameplay that's important. That's what draws in the retro guys, because the retro guys go, I remember this game from back in the day, and it's great to relive it, because even though it doesn't look like the games do now, there was a joy to the simplicity, there was a joy to the gameplay, which is the most important thing in gaming, Now, some will say the most important thing in gaming is fun, which is true to a most evident degree. But if you don't have the gameplay, then you can't have the fun. But you can't have the fun if you don't have the gameplay. It's kind of chicken and egg. Okay? So, then the biggest things, of course, when you get down to all of this, is the corporate structure of video games. The guys at the top, they're crushing down on the guys below, working under them, and by extension, us, the customers. Okay? Our games are loaded with all this stuff that we don't want, They're loaded with microtransactions and loot boxes and gambling mechanics and NFTs and, costumes up the wazoo, and all that has to be bought, There was a time in gaming where, like, if there was a weapon, if there was a costume, if there was a piece of music that made the game more awesome, especially this is in fighting games, then you played the game, you beat the game, you did extra things within the game to earn those items. I mean, the classic example I've spoken of many, many times on this channel is being in my early 20s, in my first ever flat, on my original OG PlayStation, on my couch, my first ever couch I owned myself, and like on the times when I didn't have my mates round on what I used to refer to as the couch, like playing Soul Blade, for hours and hours and hours. And that one night I decided, what I'm going to do? I'm going to earn every single costume, I'm going to earn every single weapon, I'm going to see every single cutscene, including the one with, I think it was Mitsurugi, where like, it's like a cutscene, but you can intervene in the cutscene, because you fight, there's this guy with like a flintlock rifle, and he stands to the other side, and you've got Mitsurugi there with his sort of, and if you hit the button at the right time in the prompt, then he deflects the bullet with his sword and takes the guy down. And you get a special costume for that and a special weapon for that. And you would not like to know how many times I attempted to do that. But once I got them, they were on my game, they were on my memory card, and I had them till the day that I sold my PS1 or my PSX, depending on your way of putting it. I like to think PSX, but when I say PSX, some people, some of the younger ones, think I'm talking about the Sony Live Show that we only have got free of back in the day. So, and we always, of course, when it comes to the corporate structure, the reason our games cost so much, aside from the fact that they take so long with these bloated budgets to make, because they take such technical expertise and they take such resources to make these games, is also the fact that you got guys like, Andrew Wilson and Bobby Kotick, and you got all these highfalutin guys at the top who take a bunch of money and they're not really doing anything to make the games more awesome. They might control some background dealings between different companies and stuff, but if you ask me, I don't see what their point is. Actually, I don't see the point in most CEOs. I mean, basically your average CEO is there to take a paycheck. It's the workers that make the games. It's the workers that buy the games. And it's the workers that play the games. Maybe the games should be thought about more for, the workers, i.e. you and me. Because I work, 8 hours a day in a warehouse, that takes me an hour 40 to get to and an hour 40 to come home. And I do that because I've got my boy. I may be a fruitcake, but I'm a fruitcake with a work ethic. But there's many other things I could talk about in gaming that are basically broken and wrong. But when you get right down to it, you know what the crazy thing is? I still love gaming! So, if you want to get in that comment section down below and tell me the things that you think are broken with gaming, by all means, please do so. But before you hit post comment, I want you to put in one thing about gaming that you love at the end of it. Let's try and keep it positive, even though, we live in a world of poop. We can also put on sou'westers. Okay, guys, you know the drill. Hashtag support Scottish YouTubers, and of course, as always, nae bother.